Right, and welcome to this special briefing where we are informed. We have documents indicating that the High Court has this afternoon suspended temporarily the implementation of the Finance Act of 2023. This is following a case tabled by Busia Senator, that is Okia Omtata Okoiti, against the National Treasury, raising a number of issues, including the implementation of the housing levy. One of the issues which has stood out here is as well the standard rating of value-added tax on fuel, that is from 8% to 6%. Remember, what this means is that now the government will have to wait until this matter is heard, that is on the 5th of July, to be determined by the High Court before it begins implementing the raft of tax revenue raising measures which are supposed to take effect on July 1st. That is tomorrow, which is the start of the financial year 2023-2024. And remember, the National Assembly Finance and Planning Committee has indicated that the Finance Act of 2023 is designed to ensure that the government mobilizes an extra 311 billion shillings. Initially, the indication had been 289. When the final report was out, the Finance and Planning Committee indicated the target is an additional 311 billion shillings to be able to finance the ambitious 3.68 trillion shillings budget for the next financial year that runs between July 1st, 2023 and June 30th, 2024. And one of the issues here is the targeted ordinary revenue, and ordinary revenue targets largely the taxes around import, pay as you earn, etc. 2.5 trillion shillings, an ambitious figure which has been tabled by the National Treasury. Now what we wait to see is the outcome of the hearings from the High Court on the issues which have been raised by the Busia Senator, including the controversial housing levy. If I could walk you back on the discussion around the housing levy, the Finance Bill of 2023 had proposed a 3% from the employee, matched by another 3% from the employer, capped at 5,000 shillings, that is 2,500 each. But when the Finance and Planning Committee came with this final report, it had adjusted this to change it to 1.5% from both sides and removing the cap. And what the Finance and Planning Committee has told us is that the target amount to be raised here is 83 billion shillings annually. This is definitely one of the contentious issues which has been taken to court by the Busia Senator, and we will soon be speaking to him on phone. As soon as we get him on the line, I shall be engaging him on this matter. But he has been very clear that there are a number of issues raised in the Finance Act of 2023 which have taken issue, including the standard rating of VAT on fuel. And by the way, we are still expecting the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority to announce they were supposed to give guidelines today regarding the changes in prices following the standard rating of VAT to 16% effective July 1st. And the way this works is that if you read the Finance Act, there are provisions which take effect on July 1st. There are those ones which take effect on September 1st, and there are those ones which now take effect on January 1st, 2024. Now, some of those which are taking effect tomorrow, that is July 1st, include the subject of 16% VAT on fuel. And now we wait to see what EPRA will be putting out in light of what has just developed. We have the Senator Okia Omtata Okoiti. If you can hear me, we have just seen the orders coming from the court. If you could just give us a very quick summary of some of the contentious issues you are raising in this case.
Well, there are several broad issues that you are dealing with, and to begin with is a question of what are we financing, because when you look at the budget that was taken to Parliament, it was incomplete in the sense that it did not have the revenue component. Usually the law, the Constitution requires the budget to have estimates of expenditure and estimates of revenue, and the whole reason for estimates of revenue is that so that when you raise VAT to 16%, what are we estimating to raise over that year? That estimate must be declared. If you put any tax, what are you expecting to get from that tax? There's a requirement for that estimate. The budget estimate did not have that. The budget estimate did not have that. Secondly, the Appropriations Act was passed. The Appropriations Act did not have the estimates because they were not in the budget estimate. I mean, the revenue estimate were not in the budget estimate. Then now you are passing a finance bill to raise money that has not been declared. So it's something opaque there that we need to understand. Why don't we have revenue estimate so that I know that when tax is raised on petroleum to 16%, it's going to generate 10 shillings, so that I can know, maybe it's going to, so that we don't have to raise tax and then end up generating 20 shillings, and yet the budget is only 10 shillings. So budget estimates that have revenue estimates, not just expense estimates, were not there. Number two, the way the finance bill was introduced in Parliament, there's a requirement that before any bill goes into any house, the two speakers, the Speaker of the Senate and the Speaker of the National Assembly, must review the bill and agree whether it has got anything concerning counties or not. If it has got nothing touching counties, then it is considered only in the National Assembly. If it has anything concerning counties, then it must be considered in both houses. In this case, that was not done. The bill was simply introduced in the National Assembly. The Speaker of the Senate protested, he was ignored. Secondly, the bill contained issues that affect counties, like housing, like roads, like betting, so many other issues like on medicine and what have you. They affect counties. But the bill was never taken to the Senate. Number three, after the bill had been passed, the bill was amending only 13 laws. But the Act is amending 17 laws. 4 more laws were sneaked into the Act before the President signed it. And then when you go in, there are very many issues that had issues. So even the housing thing, you are raising funds that there's no fund that has been established by Parliament. There are no estimates. You don't know what you are raising. It's open-ended. So those are among the broad issues that were coming in terms of procedure and in terms of merit. So I pray that the court suspends the coming into effect of the Finance Act so that it can have time to look at the issues. And the court has been magnanimous enough to suspend the Act, and we go back on Thursday, next week on 5th, to begin slugging it out to show so that the court can be able to make a determination on merit.
Senator, if I could come in there, you raise very substantive issues around the sequencing provided in the Public Finance Management Act of 2012 as far as the budgeting cycle in this country is concerned. Are you therefore of the view that even preceding budgets in this country have been passed in a manner that is flawed because the question of revenue estimates has emerged before but not just advanced to the courts?
Looking at it, I have looked at it. Until the Kibaki budget was okay. But the Jubilee budget began omitting revenue estimates. And for the 9 years, they omitted revenue estimates. It had not escaped me. I never looked at it keenly. And the whole thing for doing that, that's why you end up with a ballooning borrowing locally. They don't tell you what they are going to raise. So they, at a later stage, they tell you have been unable to raise this money. So they are forced to borrow locally. And that's how the money, that's how the one way that are ballooned, the public debt is ballooning. You even remember there used to be those things, midterm expenditure that used to be published. You don't see them being published anymore. So there's a lot of opaqueness on finances of the country. And that's what one of the things I'm trying to fight and make sure that we get a budget that is transparent. When you tax me 16% on fuel, I know that at the end of the year, there's an estimate that the government will raise 10 shillings.
Right, Senator, if I could ask you a quick question again. The conservatory orders have come literally on the sunset date of the current financial year. Seeking just your guidance here. So what happens at this particular time? Status quo prevails for the FY 2022-23?
Because the Finance Act is supposed to repeal the Finance Act of 2022. But because they have been suspended, the Finance Act of 2022 continues.
Right, and Senator, still on the issues you have raised around the housing, especially when you think about housing as a devolved function, if you could just give us more meat around the issues you are raising, especially around the housing levy.
Well, first of all, the housing levy is, there's no guarantee that you are going to get anything out of it. In terms of, because they are saying it's not a tax, it's not going to be a consolidated fund, so there's no guarantee that it's going to end up anywhere benefiting the public. Number two, it violates the Employment Act. Number three, in many ways, it violates the Employment Act in many ways, including there has been no assessment to show that people are earning a third of their salary and whether it's going to force them to go beyond that. Number three, housing implementation of housing is supposed to be done by the county. The county is not the national government. National government only does policy. Number 4, the whole concept is upside down. Affordable housing is usually used in terms of public housing, assuming the government says we are going to put up skyscrapers in Kibera, and we are going to fix the rent of a 3-bedroom house at 5,000 shillings, so that there is accessibility. Affordable housing is about accessing housing. It's not about owning homes. So the whole concept is upside down. They're talking about forcing people to own homes, not getting up a mechanism for making rent affordable, and as a tool whereby the government can intervene in the market to regulate the cost of rent in the market, in the housing market. So the whole thing is upside down. Further to that, there is no fund. Parliament has not established a fund into which that money will go, which means, as a levy, it should end up in the consolidated fund. And in the consolidated fund, it is not ring-fenced. Nothing prevents it from being used to pay loans. So it is something that is not thought out. Then number 4, it is taking away property rights. And yet, Article 24 requires that when you're going to deal with rights of the Bill of Rights, if you want to limit any right in the Bill of Rights, you must show that it's necessary. You must show that there was no other way to do it. You must justify it. This one, they've just done it without any justification. It's just like the big man wants it, therefore it will be done.
Good point there, Senator, and maybe just one follow-up question there is that the legislators who have a counter-narrative to what you're saying are saying that if you look at the housing regulations of 2018, perhaps we can use that as a starting point as far as setting up a kitty is concerned. Do you buy that argument?
I've even attached the regulations, and then the thing is that the new fund sort of conflicts with those regulations. It does not address those regulations. That's another point I've raised. What happens to those regulations if they are putting up this fund? Well, those regulations have a mechanism for housing, and those regulations are inferior legislation. They cannot be the basis upon which you can lay superior legislation run. You cannot justify superior legislation using regulations. You justify subsidiary legislation, the regulations, using acts of parliament. So that argument does not hold water to begin with, conceptually. But most important is that particular regulations do not set up a fund. And regulations are usually done by the executive. When you go to the question of taxing, it's only parliament which can tax, not the executive, and the taxing power cannot be delegated.
Right. Okay, Mtata, thank you for that insight. And maybe just one last question. We have conservatory orders which are now suspending the Finance Act in entirety. And one question which is emerging is, why not suspend sections of it? Why go for the entire document?
Because the entire document is dead on arrival. The moment they did not have the revenue estimates in the budget estimate, the moment they did not have concurrence of the Speaker of the Senate, the moment they included issues that concern the county government, counties, the bill died. And because it was dead, there's nothing that can be built on it. The Finance Act is equally dead constitutionally.
Okay, my last question here is, what does this all mean for Kenya's budget cycle? I mean, we all now feel like we have been doing something the wrong way.
Well, it's just a lie. We learn and we move on. The Constitution is there. If we don't like the Constitution, we amend it. We don't break the law. Article 221 has been there all along. It says the budget shall contain revenue and expenditure estimate. These guys have only given us expenditure estimates. So we don't know how much revenue they're going to raise by the taxes they're imposing. The whole reason is to be transparent. These people could raise double the budget and we don't know. And the money just disappears. So we need to have the revenue estimate so that we know the estimate is that when now the finance bill imposes these taxes, We're going to raise 10 shillings, 20 shillings, whatever it is. But not just be in the dark as to how much they're projecting to raise when they impose these taxes.
Right. Thank you very much, Busia Senator. I can see many questions online asking what does this mean in terms of a potential financing crisis. The Senator has indicated that the current Finance Act remains and the status quo prevails, right?
Yes, sir. No crisis.
Thank you so much for your time, Busia Senator Okia Omtata. We truly appreciate you joining us on such short notice.
Thank you, sir. Have a blessed time. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you, and that is the Busia Senator, that is Okia Omtata, who has just spoken to us on the conservatory orders which has been secured at the High Court. Remember, this is a matter which he himself filed, and that started about 2 weeks ago when we were still neck deep in the conversation of the finance bill, raising questions around the constitutionality of the journey we have followed as far as the tabling of the Finance Act is concerned. And as far as it's concerned, is that if you read the Public Finance Management Act, if you read Article 201 of the Constitution, we are required to have both the expenditure estimates and the revenue estimates, and the argument that he raises is that we only saw the expenditure estimates and therefore the entire Finance Act is dead on arrival because we didn't have the accompanying revenue estimates, which would have given a better sense in terms of how much the government seeks to raise from each of the proposed actual revenue raising measures, whether it is a standard rating of VAT, whether it is introduction of other levies. And that is one of the things which he says is the anchor of this matter, which has now been taken to court and secured conservatory order suspending temporarily the implementation of the Finance Act of 2023. And that now means that the current Finance Act of 2022 remains in place, and we shall continue until this matter is heard in the courts. That's next week. We are making efforts to get in touch with the chairperson of the Finance and Planning National Assembly Committee, that is Honorable Kamau Kuria, who will Kuria Kimani, I should say, who will be able to give us his side of the story in terms of what happens now beyond this, because he has been right at the front of legislation of this bill when we got into the public participation. And this, remember, the Finance Bill of 2023 attracted a historic 1,300 memoranda from the public and various stakeholders raising questions as far as all these issues are concerned. And now we wait, including to know what does the Energy and Petroleum Regulatory Authority now do, given that anytime from now they were supposed to give us the updated pump prices in view of the 16% VAT on fuel taking effect at midnight tonight. Now that seems to be something which we are very unclear about in terms of how that goes forward, given what has transpired in the corridors of justice. If you're just joining us, we just spoke to Honorable Okia Omtata, the Senator for Busia County, who has just given us the lowdown of some of the issues he has taken issue with as far as the Finance Act of 2023 is concerned. And we are privileged to have on phone Honorable Kuria Kimani, the Chairperson of the National Assembly Finance and Planning Committee. Mheshimiwa, you have just heard what has transpired. What is your initial reaction?
First of all, it doesn't come as a surprise to myself. The finance bill has been the most litigated bill over the years.